Oh, sorry, what was that?
The handout. That's just a freebie we're giving out in the chat box and in the YouTube description, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So welcome to everybody that happens to be watching on YouTube, or if you're watching this after the fact, we're going to get started in just a moment. Okay, we've got attendees coming in now into the Zoom room here. Welcome to the Friday webinar, everyone. We're just going to take a minute to get started. And I see YouTube's working very well. I'll just wait a few more seconds here until we're right at the top of the hour. Welcome to everyone that's joining us from across the country and perhaps a couple of you from the US. I know myself, I'm in northern Minnesota today, in the wilds of northern Minnesota, looking for skiable Nordic ski trails for the weekend. And so I'm happy to come to you from there as I prepare for a fun weekend. Okay, I think we're ready to go here. Welcome to the Friday webinar. I'm Derek Auger, the Executive Director of Conservatory Canada, and we do this almost every week. Next week, we're going to be joined on Friday, February 9th by Cécile Desrosiers and Eleanor Gummer. They're regulars. They come and join us almost once a month to talk about forgotten and suppressed music by women composers. And they're going to talk to us next Friday about the music of Laure Choisy, a Swiss composer. And then after that, we're going to take a couple of weeks off. I'm getting stuck traveling this month. I'll be out in St. John's, Newfoundland, adjudicating their festival. So no webinar on Friday, February 16th and 23rd, but we'll return on March 1st. I've got a couple of guests lined up that's going to take us right through March and into April. And probably in a week or two, I'll be able to email you about that with registration links, etc. So hope you all enjoyed that. We've got a nice large crowd here. A lot of you are really curious about how to motivate our students. It's like one of these nagging age-old problems, how to keep our students engaged throughout the 40 or so weeks of the year that we teach. Some of us a lot longer than that, some of us maybe a bit shorter, but students seem to be going through these short bursts of curiosity these days when they can fit us in, and yet we want them to be there every week with us. And so that's difficult, but I've talked to Sandra many times, and she shared with me some of the studio activities and interesting creative ideas she has for engaging those students. And I thought it'd be really great if she could come on and tell us about these. I think you'll really enjoy it. Those of you that are watching live, throw your questions in the chat box or the Q&A box anytime, and we'll stop at the end to answer those. And then if any of you were on YouTube watching this after the fact, feel free to email us and we can get your question through to Sandra and get them answered. There's also a free handout I'm going to give a link to that Sandra has prepared. She'll tell you about. I'm going to throw that in the chat box for those of you here live. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll look in the description for the video and you'll see a link there, a Google sharing link to the handout. So I'm going to turn this over to Sandra now. Sandra, welcome and thanks for joining us for the Star Factor here. This is a great presentation I'm sure that you put together, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm gonna get myself going right away because I have a lot to talk about. Is that working, Derek? Like,
Yep, that looks good. That's the perfect
good?
presenter view.
Okay, excellent. All right, thank you so much again for inviting me to speak to all the teachers that are listening today and maybe listening later at the recorded version. And so I hope that the people who are joined in and watching this presentation, that you'll leave today with some great ideas on how to keep your students engaged in learning and practicing. Or at the very least, maybe they're putting in a little more effort than they did before. So one of those things hopefully will happen for you. When I first set up my studio, this was over 24 years ago. I was a new teacher. I was fresh out of university. I had a mountain full of ideas and energy, and a whole lot of idealism too to go along with that. And I just imagined my studio where my students were, coming to their lessons, and they had so much fun learning with me and the other students, and they left every lesson happy and motivated, to work hard over the week, and of course, wanting to practice through the week as well. But I was really looking at my studio through rose-colored glasses because my first teaching year and my first years really showed a different reality. Students who practiced, those who didn't, students who were apathetic to mistakes, students who practiced poorly, even though I'm like, do it this way, and they don't follow anything I say at all. A few who were like diamonds in the rough, and they excelled and did wonderful. And then others who just still had squashy fingers, despite all my best efforts. So I realized quickly that most of my students did not know how to practice properly. Many students took the easy road, they played their pieces over and over, for example, and they avoided the hard work that was required to learn a musical instrument. Others did not know how to manage their time, or they made poor choices throughout the week. In effect, I realized that my students just did not know how to learn. So I sought a new vision for my studio, one where my students were actively involved in their own learning and displayed accountability for their actions. I wanted to create a learning environment for them that was interesting and stimulating, and most of all, effective. So through trial and error and learning from experiences with different types of my students, trying various strategies, many hours of reading and research, I developed teaching methods and programs which transformed my studio into the vision that I sought out at the beginning. And so this is the presentation today on the STAR factor. So this presentation will show how to use these STAR factor techniques to enhance the learning environment in your studio and assist in maintaining motivation throughout the year. So what is the STAR factor? S is for student independence, being able to provide students with the tools to work independently at home. T is for total experience, where students have a complete learning environment, which includes not only learning to play like their principal instrument, which in my case is the piano, but involves them in other musical experiences. A is for accountability, where students take ownership of their own work and are involved in decision making in their lessons. And R is for reflect and refine, where teachers can routinely make changes to their teaching methods and continue in professional development. The greatest sign of success for a teacher is to be able to say, the children are now working as if I did not exist. Why is this so important? For most of the time, students are practicing at home alone. Some may have the guidance of a parent with a musical background, but in my student, the majority of my students have parents without musical knowledge. Some may have parents more involved in the practice sessions of their children, while others have parents who just send them to their instrument. In either of these cases, it is important that students are able to learn and practice independently. To do this, students need tools that they can rely on and steps to follow for efficient practice habits. Most importantly, they need to believe their practice will be successful. When a student experiences success at their lesson, they will be more likely to repeat the process at home during their practice time. So to facilitate this, my lessons are often just how to practice this properly sessions. The success they experience during their lesson sets them up for a week of potentially good practice. At the next lesson, a student is often excited to show what they have achieved and are more open and willing to try new ideas, new ways of practicing, or trying to tackle another tricky spot. This process sets them up on what I imagine as the wheel of motivation. The wheel of motivation is a cycle of experiencing success, which can be found in other areas like business or weight loss. It begins with a student experiencing success during their lesson. This provides them with a feeling of competence and boosts overall confidence and motivation. When students feel capable and have the tools to practice properly and can problem solve themselves, they are more likely to try and more likely to practice. If they try and succeed, they are more likely to try again. This experience of success will give them confidence where they may be willing to try something new, be open to challenges, and at the very least, be more interested in practicing. I should mention that success can look different for every student depending on their level, age, and ability. But the core of this is that whatever gives the student a struggle, they can master it by the end of the lesson. It can be a small thing, a big thing, counting something correctly, adding a swing rhythm, making a great retardando. It doesn't really matter. The main point is that they experience success and feel competent. Pre-teaching is your most powerful tool to set your students out on the wheel of motivation. This teaching method taps into a student's prior knowledge and facilitates the learning process by helping students make connections between what they already know and the new information. With this approach, students will routinely experience new concepts in advance of utilizing them at their instrument. Most of the concepts that a beginner student will encounter can be first presented through pre-teaching techniques, which can include listening exercises, activities away for the piano, and games. Any student can benefit from pre-teaching regardless of age. For example, if you have an intermediate student who is learning, say, 2-against-3 rhythm, you can introduce this through gross motor action, clapping, or drumming. If they are having a hard time with this, then you know they're not ready to tackle this rhythm yet on their instrument. If one likens the process to a steady climb up the mountain of musical knowledge, then pre-teaching significantly smooths the path and lessens the incline. Certainly, any kind of student can gain from this teaching strategy. Pre-teaching gives both the teacher and the student an advantage. With pre-teaching, it allows the teacher to present material in a fun and engaging manner, and it provides opportunities for students to experience new material holistically. You can foresee any difficulties with the upcoming new material. So for example, if a student is having a hard time clapping a swing rhythm, then you know they're not ready to try this with their repertoire. You can control the pace at which new material is being presented, and it builds trust between the teacher and the student because a student will know that you will not ask them to do something that they will not be successful with. For the student, they are having a good time because they're learning material holistically and they're experiencing new material in a fun and engaging way. They will master new concepts before applying them to the keyboard, and this will allow them to gain confidence through the learning process. Pre-teaching is one of the most effective teaching strategies for creating long-term motivation. Teachers who are routinely using pre-teaching techniques are helping their students experience success at every lesson. Why does this matter so much? When students are feeling successful, they also experience increased confidence in their abilities, which in turn creates a willingness to recreate the positive experience at home during practice. Over time, students fall into this pattern of success and their motivation for learning remains high. Of course, every student will experience bumps in the road along the way, but we can have a major impact on how long they stay on that wheel of motivation by setting up our students for success by pre-teaching techniques. As students progress through levels and exams, the importance of learning properly becomes the forefront of their lessons. When teaching, I am always amazed at how poorly students study their school subjects. So many respond that they study for a test by reading material over and over, much like students who practice their piece over and over. Explaining to students how learning works is the best way to convince them to use good practice habits. My favorite expressions when I'm teaching are, "It's just science," or "It's how the brain works." One of my favorite books is Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning by Brown, Roediger, and McDaniel. This is a fabulous book on how we learn and offers great learning tips for anyone trying to study any topic. In the book, they explain how all learning requires prior knowledge. So this is where the pre-teaching becomes very important. If you want your student to really learn a practice strategy, have them try to solve the problem on their own before you teach them the answer. Help students to learn to ask questions themselves about their learning. And the book also explains how neural pathways that make up a body of learning get stronger when the memory is retrieved and learning is practiced. To make the most of this, the practice should be spaced out and you get a little rusty between the sessions. The retrieval is harder and feels less productive, but the effort produces longer lasting results. I would also expand on this and say that it also is very helpful to give your students a plan. As a teacher, understanding how the brain works and learns really impacts how you work with and deliver information to your students. A book which really impacted my teaching is Brain Rules by John Medina. This very accessible book was first published in 2008 when I was a relatively new teacher, and after I read it, I changed and adapted my teaching approaches. It inspired me to focus on teaching in a way that was more in line with how the brain works and to create teaching aids that supported student independence. The book explains 12 rules for the brain and provides a lot of real-life stories. My favorite rules from the book are as follows. Rule number 3, every brain is wired differently. What we do in life physically changes our brain, like the kind of musical instrument we play. For example, in your brain, you have a representation, say for your right hand and your left hand. And if you are a violinist, the representation in the brain of the left hand will be larger than for your right hand because it is the left hand for a violinist that is the one manipulating the strings and doing all the work. So these changes are very unique to every individual because, of course, we're all learning different things and have different expertise. This rule really hammered home to me the importance of teaching to each individual student. To recognize each student's strengths, weaknesses, interests, best ways of learning, most motivating repertoire style. You get the idea. The next rule I really liked was rule number 4. We don't pay attention to boring things. Medina states that when emotion is attached to events, they are better remembered than neutral events. Things that are unique or novel get our attention. He also says that the brain processes meaning before detail. So starting with general ideas or concepts is best for creating understanding. And the last rule that I really like, of course I like all the rules, but number 5, repeat to remember. Studies inform us that we only remember about 10% of what we read. And a student will forget 90% of what they learn in a class within 30 days, with the majority of forgetting occurring within the first few hours after class. If there is one thing the brain is good at, it is forgetting. It is no secret that the brain needs repetition to remember. What Medina says is that the brain needs space between repetitions to transform a memory into a concrete form. Spaced learning is therefore superior to massed learning. He also says that we remember things better when there was meaning attached to it, providing examples, making the meaning personal, and making the meaning more complex will lead to better learning. These 2 books, along with many others, and studies on learning really influenced me to make the learning environment for my studio very engaging and centered on the student becoming an independent learner. These are a few of the teaching aids I've created to help my students become more independent and have a chance at better home practice. This teaching aid is called How to Bake a Song, and this is the one that Derek mentioned at the start of the session that we've put in the chat and that you'll be able to access this. This is a little poster I have that sits over top of my piano all year long, and it basically gives students a learning plan for putting a piece together. So if you look at the beginning, you have your ingredients of the piece, your notes, counting, fingering, all that kind of stuff. The next step is that they're going to learn their piece hand separate. So their right hand with accurate notes, counting, and fingering. And then, of course, left hand with the same thing. And that accurate notes, counting, and fingering is our success triangle. We have to have those 3 things down pat before we can go on to the mix, hands together. And how are we going to do this? Well, slowly in sections, counting out loud, making sure our triangle is still in place, that we have all the right accurate notes and fingering. Then we get to the toughest part, bake until ready. This is getting your piece hands together at one speed without any pauses or hesitations. This is the hardest step for students, and they need to work with their metronome. And I've written, little steps that they can follow. And you probably have strategies that you would be using in here as well. My favorite is the 1 bar plus 1 beat to help eliminate the lumps. And the most important thing is that you have to be careful not to undercook your song. There can't be any spot that's not all one speed. Otherwise, your piece is going to be undercooked. Lastly, once your piece is 100% baked, you can decorate it. And this is going to be, of course, working on the beautiful things like dynamics or shaping and phrasing, this kinds of things. Over time, these steps get ingrained in my students. Eventually, they're able to know exactly what comes next in the learning process. If I have a younger student, or just maybe inexperienced, like they haven't been taking lessons for very long, once they put a piece hands together, the mix, I'll say, what are you going to do next? And they often say, oh, add dynamics. So they've completely skipped over a step. Experienced students, if I say after they have their piece hands together, what are you going to do next? They'll say, oh, hands together with metronome. Or they say, well, I have to get it like all one pace, or something along that line. So they know exactly the next step that they have to do. Another useful aid to have for students is a practice plan. This is not their assignment sheet. So I write, do this and this many times, or in this way, or this practice strategy, or whatever, other like weekly assignment paper. This is a practice plan on how to organize their pieces, their musicianship skills, their technique, a way for them to follow so they don't wonder what to practice every day. I like to divide it into day 1 and day 2. So day 1 will have certain pieces, maybe certain parts of technique or something like that. Maybe their musicianship skills has maybe progressions or lead sheets or something like that. Then on day 2, it might have similar technique or something different, another set of pieces that they're working on, and other musicianship skills, maybe like sight reading or ear training or something like that. So this is very helpful because they don't have to wonder what to practice that day. If you send a young or even inexperienced student to the piano to what to practice, they probably might practice everything, but badly, because they don't want to spend all this time practicing at the piano. But if they look at day 1 and say, well, I'm on day 1, I do this, 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 and this, then it's not a question. And for the parent, it's helpful because they say, well, you're on day 1, you got to do all these things. So there's no argument as to what you need to do to practice. So this format also allows for spaced learning, which we talked about in the previous slide. So this will allow for a student to work on something on day 1. They kind of have a little bit of a brain break on 2, and then they go back to it on the day 1. So again, it feels counterproductive because you're not doing it all the time, but over time you're actually reinforcing because you're trying to remember what you were doing before, and it will get better and better. It is useful to have general practice strategies for students to rely on. I like ones that work for all levels of students and work for all types of learners. These should be demonstrated during lessons and then used in a way where the student can decide for themselves which one they're going to use. And again, over time, this process will become second nature to them. So I have just taken practice strategies, which are like the tried and true ones that we all probably use, and I just repackaged them to make them very appealing and memorable. So for an example, if you look at yard by yard is hard, inch by inch is cinch, the aim of this practice strategy is to learn your piece hands separately. So the cards, they're hanging up in my studio. And so when the student is working on something and we're getting a new piece, we say, okay, it's time for yard by yard. We got to put this song into sections right away. And then how are you going to work on it like that? It will have everything on the back of the card, all the steps, what they need to follow. So again, over time, if I say to a student, okay, you've got your piece hands together, what's next? What are you going to try? Because you've got a little problem here. Maybe their piece is hands together, but maybe it still has pauses. They can say, well, I'm not really connected. I'm like, yeah, you're not. So they know at first they'll say, when they're starting out, you need to get connected. This is how you get connected. Later on, they say, yeah, I'm not really connected. Yeah, you're not. And then they know, okay, I got to use those strategies from Are You Connected? And that will help them figure out how to problem solve themselves. So it's not so much me saying, do this, do this. It's more the students saying, this is a problem with my playing. What strategy am I going to use to help myself so that I can overcome this obstacle? This is just a card more up close so you can see what it's like. So this one is the Better Together strategy. So this is a one about putting a piece hands together. And then you can see on the back of the card, it has all the little steps how to do it. These cards are a much more memorable way to present something important that you want your students to remember. These, like I said, they hang on my studio. When they're first being introduced to the cards, the students go over and select the one that they need, and it's kind of fun for them and they enjoy that. And like I said, over time, they don't need to do this at all. They know exactly, they have them all memorized, and they know the exact one that they need to apply. And I even have a set of these for memorization as well. Now, again, these are all things that we do as teachers all the time, but presented in a way that gives the students an easy way to reference the strategy. And so they're able to recall this themselves and then use that idea at their house. Another program I run to promote student independence is Piano Ninja. This is a program to assist with motivation for piano technique. And I was not a super fan of technique when I was a student. So this comes like really from my own personal struggles, I guess. I started this program in 2016 and it has been the hugest hit. It is one of the most motivating programs that runs in my studio. This idea came into my mind because as an adult, the year before, in 2015, I started taking jujitsu lessons. And I was loving it. As an adult, I was learning the stripes on my belt every time I got something. And then, I would get my red stripe, and that meant I was ready to tackle onto my next belt and do the test. I felt very happy. I felt accomplished and very motivated. And it propelled me, to work very eagerly towards gaining that next level. And I wanted to translate these very good feelings to my piano students, because they often work so hard all year to achieve a level, but they get very little in the way of rewards along the way. So to make this super exciting, I created an enormous wall display. This is huge. And I just cannot believe how motivating it is for all the students. So it starts with, the people in yellow who are in level 1 or grade 1 piano. And then it goes all the way to black belt. And the beginner students who are not on Piano Ninja yet because they're not in level 1, they can't wait to start Piano Ninja. They get so excited. When am I going to be on yellow? Like they just are always looking at it when it's their turn. What do I have to do to get on that? Then students who are in Piano Ninja, they actually track all the kids. And that's not just 1 or 2 that do this. They all do this. They track everybody and they can't believe, oh, look, Noelle moved up a level. When did she do that? How did she do that? They get very excited. And what I find really interesting is a lot of them will mention to me, just like, a passing comment, well, when I get to black belt Piano Ninja, which is like grade 8. So that's really exciting for me as a teacher because it shows that these kids, even if they're in like orange or green, are envisioning themselves all the way to a black belt. So the very last key I should probably mention has like little sparkly stuff around it. That's for students in grade 9, 10, and associate to show degrees of black belt. So of course the level 9s have 1 dot and the level 10s have 2 dots and the level 3s have 3 dots. And the conversation that these dots generate with the kids in the other levels has been really extraordinary over the years. I'm going to show you what the little worksheets that look like. It's literally conservatory candidate technique done up as levels. And they work through, say, a scale page here. I've got a level 1 page. This is more geared for younger students. So it's got an I can do it box where they collect stickers every time they can do that scale. At the end, though, you'll see there's a scales evaluation. Even the Piano Ninja 7 that I have on here, which you can see is a little more technical, geared for that age range usually. And it has like helpful things like fingering and things like that. But you see it still has an evaluation. The evaluation is like getting that stripe on your belt. You may learn your skills, but then you have to play a evaluation for it. I do not evaluate the scale playing. The students evaluate their own work. This has been very eye-opening because the students are very hard on themselves. Often students will score themselves very low when I would have scored them probably much higher than what they would score themselves. Getting 1 star for students is not good enough. So I have students, and I even now have students that will practice their scales for several weeks until they know they can get 3 stars. So it's really exciting to see students of their own free will practicing scales so well so they can get these 3 stars, which they're going to give to themselves. So see if you can figure that one out. They just love it. So it really helps to get kids to see that technique matters and to see it translate into their pieces. But for the students, like that's how I see it from a pedagogical standpoint. From the students, they just get very excited because now they know they can get through their, say, their orange, as we see level 2 here. And then they get very excited at the end when they've completed all the separate elements. They have to do the grand evaluation, which is all the technical for that grade. And then they get to move up to the next level. And they receive a certificate. That's all they get for it. And they watch their little head move from one level to the other. So a very motivating thing for technique that's been running in my studio now for many years. Creating an atmosphere of student independence in your studio relies on the diligence of the teacher to encourage and promote effective practice strategies among their students. I can personally say that these have worked wonders for many of my students, where at times I can simply supervise their thinking process, where they decide what strategies to use. Or I can ask them, what is the next step in the learning process? And they have the answer with little assistance from me. Does this guarantee perfect practicing in my studio? Of course not, it doesn't. But it makes my job a whole lot easier when my students can work independently and knowing that they have the tools to do good practicing all the days of the week when I'm not there with them. T is for total experience. What we learn with pleasure, we never forget. The starfish is a beautiful ocean creature. You may find this hard to believe, but even though it has fish in its name, a starfish is not a fish. There are over 1,500 different kinds of starfish. They can be small with 5 points or large with up to 40 points. They live in oceans and can have habitats that are very shallow or very deep. A starfish can live up to 35 years old. Aren't these fascinating creatures? Perhaps even you now are a bit curious about starfish. Or maybe you're wondering, why does Sandra know all these facts about starfish? Well, I routinely teach a piece to young beginners called Starfish at Night by Anne Crosby Godet. So I have amassed this pool of starfish facts because I want to create an interesting experience for my students when they are first introduced to this beautiful and mysterious piece. Memorable introductions to new pieces is one aspect of creating a total experience for students. So what is a total experience? Well, let's review what we know so far from the way that people learn. When new information is presented in a unique or novel way, we are more likely to remember that information. Another thing science tells us is that multisensory environments enhance learning. So providing a total experience in my studio entails providing a learning environment that helps students make connections to the music they are playing with the world around them. Getting them to experience music off the bench, improve skill learning through challenges and fun activities, and to have students interact with each other in a musical way. So my starfish facts provide a way of introduction, not only to the new piece, but for the student to visualize the starfish in the ocean floating about, what they look like, perhaps relate this music to a real life experience they have already had. It creates an emotional link to the content before they have really gotten into the hard work of learning the piece. When people are emotionally invested in something, they try and work harder at it. You see this all the time with students when they practice one piece to death because they love it. Here are some ideas on how you can create a total experience opportunities for your students. Show pictures from books, tablets, or create your own. I have lots of books in my studio. This is a book I use often for showing different musical instruments and from different time periods. I create little cards like this that have composers. They're always fascinated to know what composers look like and for some strange reason where their house was or where they lived. So I always try to find something to represent their house. And sometimes I have little mini PowerPoint slides when students are doing a different genre of music. For this one is the origins of jazz. So students can see that jazz is a lot of different styles. And this is just a fun way to kind of get them interested in their piece and learning that piece. It is really easy for us to gloss over this area in lessons because we have so much to do. But if you plan for it, the introduction of a new piece becomes something that students really look forward to. In my studio, if I say, you know what, next week it's time for a new piece, I get this. Yes, very exciting time. This time will not just be about the selection of a piece, but perhaps a mini lesson where you can expand their perspectives and make them think a little bit differently, just even for that moment. I really have a love of history that permeates into basically everything I do, especially my teaching. And what I have found over the years is that my enthusiasm for history kind of rubs off a little bit on my students. But of course, not every student loves history as much as me, so I try to make this as interesting as possible. I have the short little PowerPoints that I showed an example already, and have created little things for different eras and musical genres, and also have a music lending library that has been working in my library for over 15 years. And that has all books on composers, storybooks about music, like every thing you can imagine. And other really quick and easy resources like the composer head thing, you probably have that fan deck. Globe is really useful to have, or music magazines that might have really nice photos to look at or little short descriptions of things. A very involved idea I have used for the last few years is a music history self-study club called Music Explorers. I started this club over 10 years ago when I noticed a decline of interest in the music of the Baroque era. I wanted my students to experience that world of Baroque, where this music came from, and to create a bridge from that very old world to ours. It was such a great success that I've run it ever since. And this is a voluntary club that students join. And since the first year, I have 25 to 30 students sign up to this club of their own free will. I like this idea because the self-study units can round out a student's musical education without taking any more lesson time. My observation is that the units pique students' interest and increase their motivation towards that subject matter. All ages are excited to be a part of this club where younger students meet other students and older students really stay involved because now they have friends and they're doing it too. The units can be accomplished at their own pace and students choose the order that they would like to learn the units. And overall, the club allowed for an openness, to these older styles and other styles of music that they may not have heard before. So of course, I had to create a wall display to make it exciting. I made little sailing boats, they're little exploring ships with their names on them, and they move around to the different units. So this year, we are doing the classical era, and we have 4 composers here, obviously Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, and Mariana Martinez. And I put little arrows to show where they lived. And I've got little pictures that sort of represent each person. So they can take their little boat and say, oh, this week I want to learn about Beethoven. So they put it over there. And then when they're done that assignment, they'll say, oh, who should I do next? And I tell them a little bit about it. And, okay, I'll do Haydn. He sounds interesting. So the assignments are very easy and short because I have all ages that do the Music Explorers Club. So the really young ones, you have to inform their parent because they're going to need a parent to help them do the homework. But I also keep the assignments very short and easy so that there's something they can do, in one sit down, like they're not too hard. They cover the main points of the subject, and I like to add in little fun facts and make it kind of fun for them. There's a listening component to each unit so they can hear different types of music from each of the composers. Some of the units have an art component as well. And students access the videos on my website, or depending what the Music Explorers topic is, we use different types of things. And I've done tons of other ideas with Music Explorers, not just musical genres, but you can pick instrument families. I've done nature stuff, like just whatever topic you can think of. It's a pretty much endless idea. Then you need to have a party. I would highly recommend that you have a party after you have run a club of any kind. This was the pictures I took from the very first one, our Baroque party that we held at our local library. And they did all different types of activities. The first one at the top left, you can see they're sitting down. We had a snack station. Of course, you had to have pizza because it's a party, but they did try food from Baroque, which was really interesting to see them try some of this stuff. The middle picture at the top is a student writing with like quill pens. We had things where they could dip it in ink or had calligraphy like pens. The next picture after that is one of the groups doing the minuet, which we learned how to dance. And you can see there's boys in that picture too who did it, no problem. Not their favorite thing, but they did it. I was really glad that they participated. At the bottom corner, they were making little wax seals because we were writing a letter, and then they could seal it up with a wax, how they would have sealed letters back in that time. The middle picture is the giant Jeopardy style trivia game because kids love trivia. So we did that at the end, and the winning team won a prize. And then the last bottom corner, you can see one of the students there holding a violin. I had a guest come and play something. The students were able to try it. They were able to hold the violin and look at it and ask questions about it. And so a very motivating thing for them to do this club is to be able to go to the party at the end, but they have to be done by the deadline, all their work, in order to be invited. So it really gets them excited to finish. These are different challenges that I've ran throughout different years. Notemaster is something I've run for a long time. Actually, you can see the poster right behind me here. So this is just a note naming challenge that students participate in until they can try to make it to level 5. Then it just basically expands from a small range of notes to large range of notes up to 2 ledger lines above and below the staff. The interesting thing I find about Notemaster is kids who are like in grade 1 piano, they can't make it to level 5. And they're not disappointed because they know that level 5 is like the hardest, toughest level. And they do it again, maybe next year they make it. Some kids might do Notemaster for 2 or 3 years until they can make it to level 5, sorry. And then when they make it, I mean, they're ecstatic. It's so exciting. But I do let them know it's a tough thing to make it. So they know in advance that it is a real challenge. But kids like that because they don't want it to be too easy, that everyone can do it. So they kind of like it, that it's like a super cool thing if you can make it to the top level. The middle thing I've done is Destination Music, where they had 20 performance, like playing challenges that they had to do, and they could work on it all year. And then, of course, we had a party for everyone who finished. Rhythm Royalty is for little kids. It's a clapping challenge that they do for 2 months, and then they get a certificate. Sight Reading Superstar is a sight reading challenge that kids do for half a year, and then they get their certificate at the end. And Rhythm Jungle was one I did. It was a year-long challenge for beginners where we used this resource by Wendy Stevens called Rhythm Menagerie. And it has wonderful rhythms to claps from very simple rhythm patterns to more complex with backing tracks, and they can use different instruments. It was a lot of fun. These are different ideas that I've done throughout the years, and you might find some of them useful. You could just pick a topic, and run a group activity on it, like say memorizing. Have a jazz day with improvising, or have a group do a keyboard rock band day, which is really fun. Run a practice seminar. Just invite kids over and have them talk about practicing, what they like about it, how they can improve on practicing, and they help each other. Have a technique day for senior students where they can help each other out. They can usually get connected this way so they don't feel so alone. Invite a guest speaker or a musician. Just before COVID, I had invited my piano tuner, who also fixes pianos, and he came and took the whole piano apart and explained all the pieces to the students and then put it back together again. They were fascinated by this. You can have a field trip. So I've done in the past a field trip to our local university where the students could play the harpsichord. And then I've even brought them to the church where I work so they could play the pipe organ. So they have these really memorable experiences, and they remember, oh, I remember doing that. I remember playing that. Could I do a song that would sound good on that instrument? So it really leads to a lot of curiosity for some students, which is wonderful. Okay, now to A for accountability. It is not only what we do, but also what we do not do for which we are accountable. Working together with student independence is accountability. Studies repeatedly show that students who display accountability have improved academic achievement and performance. So this is an important characteristic to develop among piano students or music students in general. Accountability is huge in my studio, and certain programs have been in place for many years. So students who have been with me for the long term are familiar with and showing successful accountability. And of course, for younger students, you could maybe speak about it in terms of responsibility. You may be unfamiliar with the scholarship of Anders Ericsson or Simon & Chase, but you are probably very familiar with the outcomes of their research. It takes approximately 10,000 hours of deliberate practice in order to become an expert in a skill. Now, unfortunately, this has become a very overly simplified approach to their research in acquiring expertise. So you can't say with 100% certainty that after 10,000 hours, you're going to win Wimbledon. But you can take the approaches used by experts to help us achieve a certain level of mastery in whatever skill we would like to acquire. The pioneering work of Ericsson has been very influential in my approach with my students with regard to their practice habits. Ericsson has spent years studying the practice habits of experts in every field, from chess to tennis to music. His results reveal that the top performers in each field display the same characteristics, one of which is deliberate practice. The elements of deliberate practice include focusing on weaknesses, working in a highly concentrated and mindful way, and working through difficulties, among others. Inspired by his work and realizing that the best way to help my students was to encourage them towards this type of practice, I created practice guidelines for my students with an element of accountability built into it. So this is my practice like a pro practice kind of steps, but also evaluation for the students that show 3 levels of effort: the low, novice, low effort level, the average medium effort, and the high level, high effort area. Each level has the same steps, but what each type of level would do. For an example, if you take the first one, an expert level practicer would read their assignment sheet. An average level person will sometimes read their assignment sheet, but a novice level effort will not read their assignment sheet. And you can see that each step has the little differences that each level decides to do, which makes them at whatever level. So the interesting thing I like about this is that when the students come to me, they tell me what color they are. So some, if they know they've had a beak, they'll just say, well, I was red. Some students say they're green, and then when we look through all their little work, we say, oh, well, that's kind of yellow. Oh, that was a red. Okay, that was green. You know, we look through and they're like, well, maybe you're a mixture. You're not totally green, but you're not totally yellow. So it's very interesting to help them to think about their practicing through the week and to really evaluate and to make sure that they actually did what they were supposed to do. So If a student has a red practice, this is okay because, they're just kids and they're human like everyone else. So are you allowed to have a bad week of practicing? Absolutely. If you have two red practices in a row and they don't really have like a reason that obviously is something that you could agree to say, okay, yeah, that sounds pretty rough. If they have two in a row and there's not really a reason why, then this is where I contact the parents to say, something's going on here. If they continue with red practice, I put them on probation, believe it or not. And this usually goes as far as that, and then they kind of get back on track. But the students know after two reds, their parents are being notified. So after one red, I'll say, well, it better not be red again because you know what's going to happen. So it's on them to make sure that practice improves. I don't mind if they're yellow or green or a mixture, but we definitely want to stay out of the red area. So because they are in charge of that, it's not me being the bad guy, that has to approach the parents. They know it's their work that's the consequence of that. So the self-evaluation, I think, for this is really an amazing way for the students to take ownership of their work that they're doing every week in practicing. In a study by Macmillan and Hearn and other researchers, self-assessment was shown to promote intrinsic motivation, internally controlled effort, and more meaningful learning. With self-assessment, teachers can monitor and evaluate the quality of their students' thinking, and students can monitor and evaluate the quality of their output. As the teacher, you can ask questions to help with self-assessment, such as, did you play the right notes? Did you play with accurate counting? What was the practice strategy that you used? And so on. For very young students, I have a little checklist card that we use to help them with this process, because if you ask a student at the end of their performance, how was that? Well, that was good. That's usually the say, oh, I did great. That was really good. But then if you ask them every little thing, was this good? How was this? Well, how was this? And then they think, oh, okay, yeah, maybe it wasn't as good as I thought. So this kind of helps them that. And this little card helps because we can look through each little one that applies to their piece, and then we can see how many checks they get. Part of accountability is for students to know for themselves when they are working well and when they need to improve their efforts. Make good choices, not good excuses. I have a no excuse policy in my studio. This little poster is taped to my piano as a reminder that they are expected to make good choices through the week and stay committed to their daily practice. But kids are kids. When students are younger, they will often cite their busyness as an excuse for not being able to practice. Students at this age need help in making the right choices throughout the day and then take ownership if they don't. I have these little cards for the younger students that are often too shy to admit if they did not have a good practice week. So I have 4 cards that over time I have determined are probably the number one excuses. I was busy, I forgot, I didn't feel like it, I had stuff to do. And then the backs of the cards have little helpful tips that they can try out. And so as the year goes on, they usually tell me what they should have done differently because they're able to self-evaluate their work and take responsibility for their actions without much interference or prodding from me. Throughout the week, I have students that are doing excellent work, and they are doing this week after week. So I showcase these students in a program that's called 5-Star Standout. This is a personal challenge that all students from year 2 to grade 5 are a part of, and the goal is to achieve a 5-star practice week where they will be recognized in the music room. The student or students who achieve the most 5-star practices are recognized on my website. And you can see here a picture of 2 students from this year that made it to the website. So the students must have completed all their homework and then go one step beyond their assignment, something I didn't say to do. So for example, if they have a piece and they've learned the right hand, then they've maybe also learned the left hand or part of it on their own without me saying. We both decide if their practice week is 5-star worthy. And in 1 month, students can get as many 5-star standout practices as they want. And I don't know if you can see here, but that's the little 5-star standout board and their name goes on it. And then the ones, the top practicers are then featured on my website. And the other ones stay here on the whiteboard in the room. It is neat to see how many students do not need any of these aids as they mature. They naturally feel like they're able to do these things on their own. Accountability makes teaching a lot easier as you are not on their case about enforcing anything. It helps the teacher understand how a student views their work, what area needs to focus on, if a student can identify their own weaknesses, and so on. Working with student independence techniques, you can have a studio thriving with students who have the tools to practice properly, are encouraged by their peers, are motivated towards daily practice, and are enjoying themselves. Our final letter here is R, reflect and refine. We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. Now, the students are not the only ones who need to be working hard. The time you invest in your education and reflect about your teaching will translate into the quality of output your students produce. The benefits of reflection are that it helps you identify your teaching strengths and weaknesses. It keeps you fresh, current, and always progressing. It improves your teaching techniques and keeps you engaged and not just simply going through the motions. These are some different ways to assist in reflection and refinement that I myself have done over the years. Keep a notebook for ideas or inspiration or things that you want to work out. I've accumulated several of these over the years, and it is interesting to go back through them to see maybe great ideas forgotten, maybe ideas best forgotten, and maybe projects that you thought would be great, but you never put it together. Notes on each student in a personal profile where you want to, so you can keep track what you want to work with them, ideas for repertoire, projects, programs they should get involved with. As a new teacher, I often took notes after a lesson, sometimes even during a lesson, if I used a certain phrase or words that really worked or tried out something that I'd read about, and I would record its outcome. This was invaluable to my first years of teaching. You can see if your teaching strategies are working or having no effect. Teach the same piece to several different students and observe their practice strategies, areas that are difficult, find out why perhaps one student is excelling over another, and the bonus is you become an expert on teaching that piece. I always think about how my students are doing after a big performance where I can hear them en masse, like at a competition or recital. Were there consistent weaknesses with all students? Are certain levels doing better than others? Or look at each individual performance and make a note in their personal profile. Choose one general aspect of teaching, such as ear training, and spend the year reading about it, trying out new strategies with your students, and make a goal to improve that area in general within your studio. This I do pretty much every year. Reflection helps you build upon good ideas where you can refine your techniques, programs, or clubs that are running in your studio. I use my studio as an experimental arena sometimes and have students pilot programs or clubs or give them surveys about ideas I'm thinking about. If you really want to know how things are going in your studio, generate a survey and have your students fill it out for you. After every new program, I interview the students about their experience, and they're very honest. I use their feedback to improve the experience for the next time around, and they're so amazed that I actually listen to them and use their ideas. Reflecting on your teaching experience is a valuable tool to improve your teaching and overall studio performance. There's an old Zen teaching story which goes as follows. A student went to his meditation teacher and said, "My meditation is horrible. I feel so distracted, or my legs ache, or I'm constantly falling asleep. It's just horrible." "It will pass," the teacher said matter-of-factly. A week later, the student came back to his teacher. "My meditation is wonderful. I feel so aware, so peaceful, so alive. It's just wonderful." "It will pass," the teacher replied. We all have our ups and downs, including our students. Sometimes we feel that our teaching methods are working great and we have it all together. And other times we can feel like we just don't know anything at all. The main focus should be working with our students in a way that helps them not only through musical pursuits, but life pursuits. The STAR Factor strategies, guidelines, and techniques can be used in any capacity in one's life. Being able to successfully work independently, have accountability for one's actions, and being able to honestly assess your work. Most importantly, the STAR Factor helps to develop an inner motivation which propels you and your students to work to your full potential. Thank you so much for listening today.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much, Sandra. It was a great presentation. Lots of really great engaging ideas. You've got a great script there, and I know we're all following along and taking notes. So anyone who has a question, feel free to post it in the chat box or in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand if you want to come on live. If it's too long to type, you want to get a conversation going, we can certainly bring you on with your audio only and have a little dialogue. I see one person has their hand up. Sometimes people raise their hand inadvertently. I see Sarah there in the attendees list has a hand up. Sarah, if you want to come on, just let us know and I'll bring you on. But I noticed your hand went up quite a while ago. So lots of good feedback. If anyone has any feedback or comments, feel free to throw that in the chat box as well. We'd love to see that. Kim's asking, what books do you like to use for beginning students? That's a great question.
Like as far like beginner method book type thing?
I think that's what she's asking.
Okay, so I'm like many teachers where I use several different ones depending on the age of the student and depending like if they're going to work independently or if they're going to have a parent there. So the method book that I really like is Piano Safari, but I will choose this book if I have a parent that is coming like every week to class with them and they can and the student and the parent are working as a partnership, then that's my go-to book. If I have a young beginner, another book I really like is Wonder Keys, and I'll use that if the student is going to be working a little bit more independently, where they have parents who might come to lessons some of the time, but a lot of the time the kid is going to be more on their own. Then I tend to go with that book. If I have an older student, I might go with Piano Adventures because it moves a little bit faster and they might get a little bit bored with some of the other ones. So, I mean, it really depends on the situation. So I don't use just one.
Okay, that's really interesting. I know if anyone's curious about Piano Safari, we had the Piano Safari creators on back in the fall, so look for that replay. And we're hoping to do more too and investigate this idea of piano beginner methods and see what's out there and what people are using and why. And I know Alessandra we can have back on at some time too, because she's doing research into this. Let's see, what else do we have for questions? Lots of really helpful comments. Thanks, everybody. Seems like everyone's really enjoying this. Very engaging today. And Hannah's asking, do you have templates for your signs and motivational signs?
So I have the Practice Like a Pro, I think might be in a resource with CFMTA. So if you're a CFMTA teacher, you can access it there. You're going to have How to Bake a Song Today. The cards, they look like this. I can show you. They have like fronts and backs like that. So if you're interested in getting a copy, you can just email me. And I have these little cards too, which these are like the little ones with kids that, have their excuses. So I have things like this, but you'd have to email me for this kind of thing. And I do charge for it, though. I would just want to put that on there because they do take quite a while to put together. And I'm not sure, the other template I can send you is like the day 1, day 2. That's not a problem, things like that. But sure, if you're interested, absolutely, you can just contact me personally. Yeah. And we can get whatever you like.
Do you want to share your email address or did you already on a slide?
Whoops, I don't think so. I'll just put it here now. Okay. It's dicienzopiano@gmail.com. I think that popped up okay. Yeah. So if there's a teacher here that's just interested to connect with me, or maybe you need more clarification on something, then please, feel free to email me anytime.
Okay. And I just put the link to in the chat box again to How to Bake a Song so that you all know, you all have that. And anyone that's watching, again, you can find that in the YouTube description down below the video on the YouTube channel. Miriam's asking, what books do you like to use for teen students? Do you have any favorites there?
For teenagers, for teenager beginner, I actually use the Wonder Keys, the pop one. And I just used that a couple years ago for the first time. And that went really well for the students. I really enjoyed it. They were playing hands together right away. I thought it was really, really fun. And I'm trying to think of like other beginner material. Nothing comes to my mind right away, but if you're looking for a method book for a teenager that's got like pretty fun, engaging material and lots of like extra stuff that you can access with them. That's probably a really good one to try.
Okay, very good. So I think that's all the questions I'm seeing there for now. So I think, and we're at the top of the hour, so I think we'll stop there for today. If anyone has any other questions, let us know by email, perhaps. I have one person's raised their hand here. Monica, I'm going to bring you on to talk, or don't, maybe you did that inadvertently. I see you've lowered your hand now. That happens quite easily in Zoom. I've noted that. Okay. So thanks for everyone for your attention today and taking this in. And for those of you watching the replay later, hope you can join us next Friday again when Eleanor and Cecile are going to come back on to talk about music by women composers. And Sandra, thanks so much for your time and energy today. It was a really wonderful presentation. I know it's being well received, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the future on this.
Great. Thank
So
you.
thanks, everybody. Hope you have a good weekend. Yeah, thanks for being with us. And everyone, have a great weekend, and we'll talk with you next Friday. Bye for now.